Good afternoon and welcome to Floral Review and Tropical Sacrifice with Adjua Greaves and Lucas de Lima. I'm Maria Murphy and I'm the Interim Associate Director here at the Alice Paul Center, and I would like to begin our event today with a land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement, for anyone who may not be familiar with the practice, often takes place at the beginning of lectures, ceremonies, and public events, such as this afternoon. To acknowledge is one small way to show respect to Indigenous peoples and their enduring connection with their traditional territories and its histories. In an effort to recognize both the historical and ongoing practices of colonization, we wish to affirm that the Alice Paul Center and program in Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies at the University of Pennsylvania occupies the traditional unceded lands of the Lenni Lenape people. We wish to acknowledge the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here together in this community that, while virtual today, is based out of Philadelphia. Our year at the center, dedicated to environmental feminisms, is part of an ongoing effort to recognize our own individual and institutional place in settler colonialism, and to better understand and support the relationship between Indigenous knowledges, climate activism, and relations with and within the environment broadly conceived by engaging these ideas alongside other environmental feminist work more broadly throughout the year. One relevant and local issue I'd like to draw our audience's attention to tonight is about the campaign for Penn to make payments in lieu of taxes, especially since there ended up being a rally today at the same time as this event about pilot programs in our city. As many of you probably already know, as a mega nonprofit, Penn is not required to pay property taxes, which are a primary source of funding for public schools here. If you haven't already checked out pennforpilots.org, I want to encourage you to look at the website and read up on what a pilot program at Penn could do for our school district and how this permanent commitment, unlike a time-limited or resource-limited gift, could make a material, structural impact on many lives in our neighboring communities. Of course, private property on stolen land is already an issue we must address. And I encourage you, especially if you're in the Penn community, to consider how you might get involved in the campaign to make sure our institution pays its fair share. Thank you. To begin our event tonight, I am very pleased to introduce our host, Ricardo A. Bracho, the sax artist in residence here at the Alice Paul Center. Ricardo is a writer, editor, and teacher who has worked in community and university, theater and video and film, politics, and aesthetics for the past 29 years. He's held academic appointments at several other institutions, and his award-winning plays, which include The Sweetest Hangover, Sissy, Puto, and Mexican Psychotic, have been produced in Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco, as well as workshopped and staged nationwide. His focus in community has been on social justice, public health, and the arts with queer and trans youth of color, Latina, Latino, and Latinx high-risk populations, queer men of color, and incarcerated men. This coming fall, as the finale of our year dedicated to environmental feminisms, Ricardo will be staging a production of Leonora Carrington's Opus Sinistras here at Penn, while he is a fellow at the Center for Experimental Ethnography. He's been an extremely important presence virtually and in the flesh here these last 2 years, and has been a very generous interlocutor for many of us in the Penn community. It is my pleasure to pass the mic over to Ricardo A. Bracho.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to do a racialized body acknowledgement. And because I think both Lucas and Adjua write from that place, that body with great lyricism and desire. I'm going to read both of their biographies to start, and then they will come in to do their sets with an encore. Adjua Greaves writes ethnobotanical literary criticism, collages detritus into heraldic devices, and has begun working with video in response to a spring 2020 commission from Issue Project Room for their isolated field recording series. Her pamphlet, Of Forest and of Farms, on faculty and failure, was recently published by Ugly Duckling Presse, and her chapbook, Close Reading as Forestry, is published by Belladonna. Greaves performs frequently across a broad spectrum of venues and has most recently been published in the Brooklyn Rail and Letters to the Future, Black Women, Radical Writing, Corée Press. Formerly a Monday night reading series curator at the Poetry Project, site director for Wendy's Subway Reading Room, and an artist residence at Rauschenberg Residency, Greaves is currently based in New York City, where she is young mother of the Floral Review. Lucas de Lima is the author of Wetland, Action Books, and Tropical Sacrifice, forthcoming in 2021 from Birds LLC. His writing has appeared in Pen Poetry, Poetry Foundation, Boundary 2, Apogee, Syndicate, and Brooklyn Rail. He holds a PhD in comparative literature from the University of Pennsylvania and is the recipient of fellowships from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Councils of Canada and the Charlotte W. Newcomb Foundation. Welcome, Adjua, and then Lucas.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, and thanks, Maria. Thank you, Lucas, for asking me to join you to talk about the ways that our works are engaging these themes. And I'm just so looking forward to this conversation. I'm going to read from some of the opening poems from Of Forests and of Farms. The third poem in the book is the bibliography of the book, and I'll read part of that, but not the entirety. Okay. Whiteness cannot help itself. Whiteness must frame wilderness as threat. Whiteness knows integrity will mean its end. Whiteness thrives only in isolation. Fred Moten said, "Blacken up," an invitation to find the darkness within and hold its horrors to the bosom del tuo essere, assuring the void you know it is the space that connects the universe to itself. If your spirit was born into a whiter, brighter, lighter body, reject the sirens luring you out of our dark forest to shipwreck on their civilizing shores. Take good care to shape with language worlds that want to hold us all. And when you hear them say dark, you will know that it matters. They will say it when they mean bleak. They will say it when they mean grim. They will say it and show surprise at your carnation's implication. They will say it and be surprised at your enthusiastic invitation. Leonard said, "You want it darker, we kill the flame." Fred said, "Blacken up." Zora said, "I feel most colored when I am thrown against a stark white background." They will say it when they mean a hell zone in which their shields are disintegrating, a hell zone in which their projections, a hell zone in which their protections show themselves to be towering cages of ivory, a hell zone where the ceaseless rending of their telltale hearts beat. Never more, now than ever, more never, never now, more ever. After 300 years, do I still want this clan of goblin guardians patrolling the boundaries of my existence? Or am I ready to join my families in the cosmos finally and for real? What better to call the energy, bridge of false chasm, sparkle and sunshine, bosom of cosmos, knowing without knowing? What better to call this energy than dark matter? G. Grazie alla Dea per questi doni ed il tempo per condividerli. Thanks to the goddess for these gifts and the time to share them. Adnan Etal, Premonition. Berkeley, Kelsey Street, 2014. Alan Basie, email exchange with friend Adjua Greaves, 2020, June 6th. Baker, Jr., Houston A. Caliban's Triple Play, Critical Inquiry. Butler, Lois, Conversation with Niece, Adjua Greaves. Phone, 2020, March 15th, Sunday. Carini, Patricia R., Starting Strong, a different look at children, school, and standards. Another slant on knowledge. New York, Teachers College Press, 2001. Chromeo, Intro, Fancy Footwork, Vice Records, 2007. Cloutier, Jill, In Conversation with Lindsay Colasa, The Happiness Tree. Albizia, Julie Brissin, The Plant Report. Every Plant Has a Story. Sustainable World Radio Podcast, 2020, August 11th. Cohen, Leonard, and Patrick Leonard, You Want It Darker. You Want It Darker, Columbia Records, 2016. Davis, Anthony Fanon, Conversation with Friend, Adjua Greaves, Brooklyn Queens Expressway, 2020, September 25th, Friday. Dryblatt, Ian, Conversation with Friend, Adjua Greaves, Dumbo, Brooklyn, 2017. Dungy, Camille, Editor, Black Nature, 4 Centuries of African American Nature Poetry, Athens, Georgia. University of Georgia Press, 2009. Fisher, Harvey Sid, Scorpio, Astrology Songs, Amarillo Records, 1993. Flusser Willem, Nancy Ann Roth, translator. The Gesture of Planting, Gestures, Minneapolis, University of Minnesota Press, 2004. Glusman, Yelena, Conversation with Collaborator, Adjua Greaves, Early 21st Century. W. When she says she has been hurt, believe her. Ask her what she needs. Listen to her response with all your might. Reject the desire to leave her be. Scan the planes you share for threats and predators. Protect her from violence, and then thank her for the safety you will enjoy. Like all Black women, plants dream of the day their wounds will matter. In an effort to love me better than she had been loved, my mother shipped me off uptown to hell. For it was shaped just like a school. For it finished presidential wives. For it convinced her it could care for me, and she wanted to believe that. For it convinced her it would care for me, and she needed to believe that. For it pretended to be good, and she decided to believe that. This hell so slender, white, and wealthy. TK Centos del Campo da Teni. Maintaining life in this body requires vigilance you can't comprehend. By which, of course, we mean, what do plants want? And where within our bodies might we know it? We dreamt, we told Babylon, every plant is a black woman, and the naked empire said, they are not smart enough to feel pain. In tete-a-tete talks signaling virtue, a young vegan proclaims, I don't eat anything with a face. Years later, we hear, I don't eat anything that had parents. Just now, a spider startled me alone on this picnic bench in Marsha P. Johnson State Park, and I, as if I cared for nothing, had learned nothing, considered nothing, offered you, here, nothing. So tense, so worried and so fragile for the Jupiter of me. I, beloved reader, then projectiled, flicked, disastered, that surprising essere to an elsewhere and unknown. I made a chaos from my reflex and now feel so sad. The shame of being this manner of being on earth is its own Jupiter of woe. The pain of being, the shame of being this manner of essere umano on earth is its own Jupiter of woe. Anti-Blackness is anti-environmental. T. The floral progress present in a forest differs from the floral progress present on a farm in a way that helps us understand imbalances at work, in higher arts education, and other arenas where hierarchies are ubiquitous but not essential. 1. Where are futures created, A, by innovation, B, and where by accident? 2. Where in the freedom of A, the autonomous forest, 1, does fear of death, A, disrupt radical creation? 3. What does the farmer sacrifice for the certainty of yield's demands? What does the farmer gain from mastery of the floral wards? What does the farmer know? 4. Where do these metaphors cloud critical sense? Where do these metaphors emerge from? Where do these metaphors fail? 5. What do they help us see? What do they help unearth? What do they help bolt? I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Maria and Ricardo, for your introductions, and Adjua for that amazing reading. Really such a privilege to hear you read from your new publication. So my book that's coming out this year starts with an intro. So I'll just read that kind of preface and read some poems. In this dream, I have the body of a chicken instead of a heroic bird. I dream my way in and out of neo-fascist Brazil, where I was born white before immigrating to the United States as a child. Variegating, my feathers take on shades of white, beige, brown, and pink, an excess of vision through my third eyelid. This is how I escaped the factory farm and learned to fly. I am a colonized and colonizing animal. Because my foremothers survived, I opened my eyes to a spectrum of light, color, and motion broader than human sight. At the farm's edge, undomesticated, I can see through myself, a species of tropical decay. I am a product of race mixture and rape at the hands of European fathers. I am The beginning of the end of the world, I reincarnate with sisters and brothers who were already here before the chicken or egg. This is the emanation of ancestors. A chicken's UV light cone detects at the border of human and non-human, female and male, north and south, illness and health, spirit and meat. This is how a flock breaks the lens of sacrifice. In the country whose territory slices the lungs of the world, the sky becomes our open vein. The white people, they do not dream as far as we do. They sleep a lot, but only dream of themselves. Daviko Penawa, the falling sky. Pinto, chick and slang for penis in Brazilian Portuguese. An orange bloom at dawn behind the corpse of Pinto's father strewn on train tracks. A bird caught in his hair, the gasp of body versus machine drained fluids out of the egg Pinto glowed in. His mother's belly, his mother's head would never be the same. The moon, like an overgrown infant, crushed her husband. But Pinto, you are the sky, she would say, after dropping Pinto on the floor, dragging and bruising the yellow soul who made her husband kill himself. Pinto is my lover. I tell my friend about the beak he simulates with his hand when he contacts the dearly departed. I haven't given up flying with Pinto, despite my fear of an invisible population in our room. Bodies glimmer in Pinto's cornea, black or white, with or against us. I make a beak when I slide my hand inside Pinto's anus. His muscles emit rays, pulsating around my fingers, extracting from my wrist another bird body to pry open the great wormhole in our room. Who told me to love an eggshell? Who made me release the crows? On a pillowy night, who handed me scissors so I would spill the stuffing? Feathers the color of oil, they taste like dollars on my tongue. It is dollars Pinto wants, or says he wants, though he considers himself a spiritual guide. His mother, black and Indian, bled down to him a sky aflame with genocide. It rained toucans whose feathers were already ashen. There was not a child who did not collect a big beak to open and close at will, sucking the shimmer back into feathers that no longer exist, but could be imagined on a national holiday like an extinct tribe. On days when I don't drain myself, but shed the blood of the earth all over my race, it is not difficult to soar with Pinto. The earth is just another point on my spine. The unicorn, just a clarification of pain. I believed in the blood that spurted from my eyes into the eyes of a doctor, so neither of us could see, a brave chicken wedged in my solar plexus. I continue to bear children via my uterus of birds, each child a Pegasus designed to slice heavens and nick the face of God. He who syphilizes the future, he who colonizes the sky and gives me a lion as a lover, a brown sack in my mouth. Like some half-split sun, drooling light, I'll never drink. Of course the STDs aureoled Pinto's head. We were becoming divine. Claws on my lithe pale flanks, the sun rocking and ripping my clouds of speech, deforming the names of our children who carry this fracture within. Spermless shafts of light, their bodies. Pinto says I am his gringo savior and my jaw cracks. I want to flood his face with my blood. His eye ripped out, the blood of a branch in my throat, lodged precisely where his penis should massage me. In homage to a new earth mother, swathed in pelt and pearls, observing our via negativa, sanctifying Amazons of thirst. Upon Pinto's belly, I pray for a placental crater in our room. Everything is suddenly too wet. Holy Father, caked in mud. Saliva in my heart as it tries to speak back to some forlorn, drippy spirit shedding foreskin. Sugarcane juice and light blue eggshell. I know better than to give up on death's ejaculations. The curtain no longer paper. Into Pinto's little bill, I shove my hand, making his throat convulse from my thrusting. Yes, Mother Jaguar says, you must fist him in the mouth to find a way into his entrails. the dagger in the nest where he was stabbed right out of the egg. In this dream, we rip the ancestral sky. In this dream, we betray our landlocked species. In this dream, we refuse to be born inside empire's dreamlessness. Clara, philosopher dog, dripping from her beard, the merging of banks, bones, and soy farms in her head, gazes at Pinto, her baby bird owner, halfway between reptile and angel. In animal branches of thought at dawn, broken down into sparkling specks, I roost on a rocking chair. I watch everything in the room be human for something else. A savage melody airily repeating, Pinto, 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 until he never fades in a demon-packed world, until he orders me about with the chicken essence of a medium beheading a rooster and smearing its blood on his seropositive body for a fee of 100 reais, anchoring spirit society in a stronghold of whirlpooling clouds, daubing Pinto's flightless body black, white, red in spirals of permanent welts, scars, scrofulous inflammations, crying, Pinto, be immune to the sky pivoted against you. Pinto, come back to our eyes when you die. I behold Pinto every day. Pinto tells me to look up. Until the jagged mass of genocidal flesh remolds itself into a jaguar, writhing so her rosettes blur, killing everything but a memory we never had, indissoluble saints hypnotizing our knots, imitating the cry of the ocelot, the whistling of the sloth, the shout of the macaw, and a tree. We no longer situate on the opposite side of the earth. All I want to say is that they don't really care about us. Iroko, tree we worship in memory of the enslaved who preferred 200 lashes instead of fulmination, live blood running down the trunk instead of latex in the thorax. In Pelourinho, nothing grows and a child's spirit offers popcorn. Sky, not ablaze today, but muffled with clouds steered by Iroko. A handicapped beggar observes with us the batucada. In the square, they whip the man who would not cut down, the tree whose name fabricates thunder. Colonel of Africa, where J. Christ was filmed as MJ. Iroko exploded, his light skin off the drum. Our foremothers, absorbed by empire, like crystals intact in our guts. The open pustule from which our plumes extend. So we layer our voice with another voice. So we wrap our song with another song. Our structure organized as a flower, forever pedaling. In the assassin wind, the choppers of death here are not clandestine. Unlike the rivers under São Paulo, where we barely breathe is where me and Pinto put our beaks to the ground and suck out a scorpion, crying night and day, remembering a time when there was no night, remembering the Kayapo myth when there were no stars, no horses, but stories about horses. We unsaddled ourselves inside. I penetrate the depths of my race while Amazons curse. Spectral flicker as the smoke of my blood. My arms shackled by loggers who see me as the transparent, colorless wings of my friendship with Pinto. The way we love each other, though, a bird batters against the cavity, trying to break off, forced to break out of the continental cage, eggs of devastation we lay because when Pinto took a knife from me, his gash gave birth to feathers. Now Pinto teaches me that inside time, there is more time. Now Pinto teaches me that inside me, there are more feathers. To believe him without falling into a pit of white fathers, to believe him while mothering my feathers, to believe in native mothers who gave birth to so many mongrels, in the model bloodbath of Brazil. Thank you.
Okay. I will. Lucas, I really just want to talk to you about what you read, but I will read a little bit more. I will, I promise. Let's do. Okay. B. By which, of course, we mean what do plants want, and where within our own bodies might we know it? Par exemple, watching Black Girl 1966. When the life of Usman Samban's hero comes to that familiar, exasperated, resolute, pristine, instructive, liquid end, we understand at once how elegantly, privately, entirely, our theorem has been grandly unified. And on the street below the cinema, tell our biffle wide-eyed, she killed herself because her captors did not deserve her. And without resisting, dear Biffle follows us headlong into the floral implication, with the kind of ease that comes from knowing well the capacious varieties of death. Scorpio, oh, Scorpio, 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 oh. I. If by forest we mean a dense growth of trees and underbrush covering a large tract, and if far less often we might mean to cover with trees, then by farm we might mean a tract of land devoted to agricultural purposes, and nearly as often to grow or cultivate in quantity. And if by faculty we mean ability and power and innate or acquired ability to act or do, and an inherent capability, power, or function, and any of the powers of the mind formerly held by psychologists to form a basis for the explanation of all mental phenomena and natural aptitude, and then also a branch of teaching or learning in an educational institution, and the members of a profession, and the teaching and administrative staff, and those members of the administration having academic rank in an educational institution, and faculty members, and finally, power, authority, or prerogative given or conferred. And if by failure we might mean omission of occurrence or performance, especially a failing to perform a duty or expected action, and more concretely, a state of inability to perform a normal function, or also an abrupt cessation of normal functioning, and also a fracturing or giving way under stress, and perhaps often a lack of success or a failing in business and a falling short, as well as perhaps of particular interest to those of us gathered at this text, a crop failure, and of course, the meaning held closest to the anxious heart, one that has failed. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Adjua. Born out of 521 years of superimposed lives, I stretch my wing like a blade and feel Brazil in my side. It is Pinto threatening to kill himself again. Our Lady of the Apparition refracting all light, walls curved inward from the explosion of days. I would vomit Christian blood if Pinto weren't already doing it. Arc of his back, ghetto in the sky, in the nest of Mother Jaguar, Pinto's feathers beam an infrared that keeps shedding wings of blood. Crust, I thought, was sight. In Mother Jaguar's eye soul, she links her string of guts. She borrows Pinto's knife. In the photo of Juma, Mother J chained to the Olympic torch, shot in the head because she lunged at a brown soldier, rosettes rippling in the camouflage of uniformed traitors. The face of the white man carrying the torch lit on a string of saliva from Juma's heart, to the twitching rainforest, blazing the air like a match we clutch with flooded eyes, her line of fire through this shield of tears boiling. The origin of flight unravels before our eyes as the wing of a plane ossifies. These are the wishbones of deep time, our will to empower halved fins. Ground up or tree down, vertebrae wrapped in gold airfoil and shoulder joints we didn't think we had, in the barbed wiring of chickens learning to fly, when sisters of prey hammer talons into cold ground from limbs where worms float. Our bodies project the circulatory sky of organs in which we ride the way our ancestors get up to run the minute the butcher lops off their heads. J. Christ is all bones when me and Pinto hug him. To refill his skeleton, cuz the air roasts divine flesh, and everything is sad for J. Christ. Everything we say streaks atmosphere with wire. When, not if, the apparition of his mother materializes, black on the creek bed, native on a trunk, an iPhone's throwaway from the hydroelectric dam, can we flit into her mouth, quaking throat that ripples as the force field where we sound out, whatever is on the other side of sacrifice. Though they bred me and Pinto artificially to boom large breasts, our extra weight doesn't keep us from flying. After we swallow the gasp of halibut containing 43 times the legal limit of arsenic, the angels of Zika appear and revitalize the Hiudosi with the love of our mothers, encased in the shells of the mosquitoes who infected our mothers, cross-fertilizing the sobs of a man on a boat and the choking and spitting sludge of the dead river. We all sail with wingspans, synchronized in muck. First our grandmothers died, and then our mothers. And our eyes turned green in an ensanguined mass of chicken breast. I asked Pinto, how can you live like this and remain a chick? Well, my goosebumps turned gray from the martyrdom of industrial farm life, soiling boiling water under desertified sky, and now a crown of flowers, brambles our scalded heads, the feeling of blossoming on the cross by which J. Christ is queen by his solidarity with queers. Our Lady is Brazil by her solidarity with orishas. Jay cries his chicken by his solidarity with hens. The hen spills blood on the ground by her solidarity before. Nails pounded into wild bird sky. Thank you.
Lucas, thank you so much. I'll bring everyone back in because we are lucky enough to have a conversation now hosted by Ricardo. But I just want to say to folks who are watching, feel free to make comments or ask questions, and Ricardo will incorporate them.
I'm not looking at them. Will you do that? I want to start because Adjua wanted to begin asking Lucas questions. I want to start sort of between the two of you, and then I'll jump in when I see the need.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, any question for each other?
Yeah. I mean, there's a part of this manuscript, Lucas, that that I keep coming back to, and it's like a way that it's like echoing through all the parts. And let's see if I wasn't sure that I would remember it exactly, so let's see if but it's really about the spirit in, or the potential for spirit in everything, or the potential for soul and agency in everything that I'm hearing. Honestly, it feels like in every line, like it feels like that's like the voice that you're speaking from is this potential, or one of the voices that you're speaking from is this potential for I don't know. I don't know enough about animism to say that it's a animistic voice. I don't know that would make sense to people who really know about that, but I feel the potential and kind of the consequences of an assumption that everything is alive, and that there's there's no, as I'm reading and listening, I'm feeling like there's agency, desire, potential disappointment and connection possible, like in every node of material on that we're on the planet with. And it's a very exciting idea. And then there's this one, and I may be misreading that, so please tell me if that's not as important as I think it is. But then there's this one place where you say it's something like, I think it's Iroko is witness to, or is pointing to a this potential that anything in a room could be human for anything else. And the preposition for really problematizes human for me in this whole context, in a way that's so exciting and like disruptive for me. And that's kind of the first thing that I want to talk to you about, the like the place of voice and spirit in throughout the universe that you're writing from, or perhaps or in the perceived lens that I hear you writing from.
Now, that is a completely appropriate question to use, like a word that's not even strong enough. It's a great question. I think like where the poems start, and I think of the book itself as the way that I wrote it was almost like there was a set of poems, those Pinto poems that are based, extremely obviously loosely on autobiography and this relationship I had. And I wrote those actually like in 2013. And then the other ones they came very gradually in different bursts. But the narrative of the book came way after those initial ones. And the person that I was in a relationship with, who's now a dear friend, Pinto, is, as I say in the poems, like a very spiritual person, and the way that many Latin Americans and Brazilians specifically approach spirituality as this, like, many different traditions, right? And to be able to talk about things as like enchanted in these ways, or as you say, kind of animated, it becomes very easy once you enter this like spiritual world that is itself. I mean, I felt very ready to sort of, be more exposed to that. This is a relationship that happened while I was living in Brazil for a year. And I guess also drawing on like the mythology of my first book, and how the speaker there is a bird, and it deals with this like alligator and this friend of mine who died. It was almost, I see the book as like a continuation of that mythology, or, pushing that mythology into a different space. And I also started to see it even geographically. Like right now I actually happen to be in Florida, but my first book was set in Florida, and then it moved south. I moved southward, right, to Brazil. And so Florida becomes this like weird, interesting launch pad, I guess. And I think that like the chicken also became something like a vehicle for me to be able to animate, right, all these different presences and forces and absences as well, in the sense that, I couldn't be like some kind of I like the idea of thinking about this like debased kind of like, bird that actually outnumbers humans, and that has this kind of other force too, that we can, through poetry, maybe only through poetry, it's possible to channel in some way, but also as a way of thinking through my own like racial positioning, as someone who's obviously white in Brazil, but has had a different experience here in the US, as someone who grew up in the US. So my sort of connection to Brazil becomes complicated by that, but it also becomes this like possibility, right, that opens up through the chicken, that then, as soon as you speak through an animal figure in that way, you think through, like, I think ecology that way, it becomes so much easier to actually animate everything, as you're kind of pointing to.
So to piggyback on that, and to ask both of you, both in that sort of ecological and anthropomorphism that you're doing, Adjua has the line, like all Black women plants, and you have the line, like an extinct tribe, and then also the sort of all-overness of race that's in both of your texts, that there is a sort of, parallel lines, plants and Black women, that become perpendicular in a kind of synergistic way within work. And then these birds that you have that are, queer man lust, just to say it in a succinct way, that I both, that was both the sort of, attempts to sort of work through metaphors and logic of race and racism, and also to sort of racially denude them. So say things if that jumps at you.
I'm really interested in the parallel becoming perpendicular, like that just like drew something very clear in my mind. Kind of like I think what it means to me, and correct me if this is not what you meant, but like what that would mean to me is, maybe in one context we can see, or in disparate contexts we can see alignment that maybe we're surprised by, and then we call that parallel. We're like, oh, there are parallels here. And then when the parallel becomes perpendicular, or if we're asked for the parallel to become perpendicular, then we're asked to take these like disparate channels of the network of references, and we're asked to intersect them and to find what is happening at the node of their kind of like shared consequence.
Ding, 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 yes.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Well, you did it.
I mean, wow. I feel like I think I'm going to be really thinking with that idea for a long time to come, because there is something about I love also that you say like the all overness of race. Like I think that that's something that maybe throughout the 20th century we have the all overness of familial relations. You could say that was Freud's lens, was like the all overness, right? But there's also something, and then maybe late 20th century, early 21st century, and all overness of the postmodern lens. Like those are the two that I can think of right now. But there's something that's like it feels in my work, and maybe in Lucas's work as well, it feels like not an option, it feels not like, oh, I decided to put on this lens to see if I could understand the world better, XYZ. It feels to me like without this intersection of, without realizing how my Black how my Black femininity is received in a white patriarchal hyper-capitalist world, like without seeing the parallels between Black femininity and flora as resource, without seeing those parallels, and without then truly like going straight from the parallel to the nexus, without that, the world like didn't make sense to me. It just didn't. It's not like it wasn't an option of a lens that or in another way, a family member of mine, I had to finally accept that, like, as incongruous as it is, this family member is a Trump supporter. And it was like it took these 4.5 years to get to that point, and it makes zero sense until I just accepted that it was true. And then so many other things that didn't make sense about this person click into place and become sensibilized, And so there's something for me that that's like, it feels less like this is a way that I'm looking through the world, as opposed to I figured out some undergirding structures of these systems. But I also know that if I grabbed in another direction, if I was living a different desire life, or a different phenotypical life, or a different regional life, or so many other things, that there are other nodes that we can connect to, find the parallels, and make sense of the world in a way that feels incontrovertible at that nexus, like, and I don't know what to do about the fact that there's like 100, that feels like 100% certainty in many directions, other than to I guess recognize that maybe, yeah, I really don't know what to do about that, other than to just kind of marvel at it for the time being.
I was wondering, going off on what you're saying, Adjua, about kind of this relationality, right? And like the expansiveness of relationality that actually needs to be kind of activated. And, I think something that I really appreciate about your work is it's not, it's kind of, I mean, it's performative in the way that it's like, it's not about the autobiographical as such, and you kind of rupture that with all these voices, the citations, and now, you know, having heard like the singing, which was really amazing to hear. I was wondering how you saw the like voice working in the text in that sense, in terms of like enacting these kinds of ruptures.
Thank you. That's a great question. Let's see. I think it came in through this dictionary work that I started doing with my first publication from Belladonna, which was called Close Reading as Forestry. And one of the first is I think that phrase came to mind, and then I needed to be in dialogue with my, you know, language of origin to figure out what I really meant by that. And so that was me making a poem of taking this phrase, close reading as forestry, and you know, making a poem with the dictionary of it. And so there's a there's a duet between my need for a certain word in a sentence that I found beautiful and what the dictionary actually said it meant, you know, in Merriam-Webster's universe. And so then the idea of how to perform that work, how to present it on the page was, you know, I made a field poem. I had my voice on one side. I had the dictionary's voice on the other, italicized, right? But then the idea of performing that became it's like, well, how do you perform an italicized voice? And so I experimented a few years ago with singing those italics. And from there, kind of recognizing that I was constantly in dialogue with the official word on my language of origin, like began a kind of deep sense of multiple voices within. And I think it probably wasn't until this strange last year of really intense isolation that I found myself writing, not research, I guess I found myself writing multiple voices in a way that I kind of I registered that as you know, what was happening inside me in a year when I wasn't talking to people as much as I would want to. And so I was creating that on the page. And the way it looks in this book is the way it looks in this Ugly Duckling Presse book is different and more developed than in the Belladonna book, in that, you know, I have I'm quoting lyricists, poets, fiction writers. I'm quoting, you know, a children's book about fields and meadows. I'm quoting a book about the Congo, people in the Congo. You know, I think there was something about the dictionary vocalizations a few years ago that helped me realize that I really loved playing with a variety of graphic forms on the page, certainly, but that as a poet who performs their work, that meant that I also got to play with a variety of vocalizations. And I think that wasn't, I think that those two things have developed independently of one another. And I mean, I just intuitively really see COVID isolation in the way in the way there's like so much dialogue in my work right now, but there's something that probably, even without last year, even without this particular pandemic, I think it probably would have emerged eventually. There's just something about, as somebody who has studied many languages but not really gotten, not, I haven't gotten to a place of being able to freely express myself in multiple languages. There's something that I really crave about seeing how things emerge in the slight prismatic shifts from one language to another, from one dialect to another. And so I think part of what I'm doing in terms of the multiple voices is doing that in English and sometimes in Italian, but also in spoken voice and in sung voice and in variations of those.
We're supposed to close now. I want to check with Maria if there's any Facebook or YouTube comments or questions. Sadie Murphy says, "Thank you, beautiful poets, for sharing your work."
Sade!
Hey, Sade.
Yes. I do have one more question for Lucas, and it's about violence and sex. Fanon, and in his work, violence, either the violence of the colonial or the violence of the colonized, are not given a different valence, and that seems to be the case in sort of your birds of prey and predation. The sexual is sort of both delicious and scary, in the sort of top and bottom poetics and voices that are being taken on. I wanted to sort of, tickle and tease that.
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot, particularly in terms of, like critiques of like violence being made, racialized violence, particularly anti-Black violence being made spectacular. And the book does grapple with that in the endnotes, where I, with the help of like readers, actually Sade was one of them, I decided to change the endnotes in order to like just acknowledge that, really terrible logic we're living in, where this violence is circulated in this particular way. But I think in the poems themselves, the way I see it is like, and that's how I like approach poetry, is I felt, even knowing, about these problems, like I felt compelled to move through that spectacle. And in some ways, that's what the book is about. It's about trying to like get through this kind of framing of racialized, indigenous, Black bodies and other racialized bodies, and like moving past that towards spirit, and allowing for like spiritual presence. And a spiritual presence that actually can't be treated like a body, cannot be penetrated, it cannot be mastered, it cannot be domesticated. And it's about these different relations, that are visible but also invisible through the book. So that's how I've come to, I'm not peace with my violence in my work, but definitely like an acceptance of it, that, it is there for a reason. And it's hopefully working in a different way than, spectacularized violence.
Oh, I thought it did very well. I thought it was sort of what that calls those things we cannot not want. Whether or not we go through all the sort of, understandings of them, we still want them. And we are always wanting.
No, that is like, that's actually, I haven't, I guess, I don't know if I'll ever understand that, where like violence, I think I read that in terms of just like even anthropology of like the Tupinambá in Brazil, and how sort of their understanding of violence, and the indigenous thought of study, where something even like cannibalism is actually a way of creating meaning. So I don't really know what to say about it in a way that makes anyone feel good in our world, in the Western world, except that certainly violence is, has a significance, and it has a when you perform it in a poem, I think it can be it's important to re-inhabit it sometimes, I guess is what I would say, right? And rather than shy away from it. And I think especially when I think about Brazil and all the kinds of violence that happen there that are actually erased from our perspective in the US, So I think that's where I found kind of like the thrust, another thrust of the book and fuel in the book, to actually like make this, make US readers confront it.
Great. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Maria, for putting this together. Will you join us just to say our goodbyes, Maria?
Yeah, thank you all so much. That was such like a very sensorially rich listening experience. And I really appreciate you hosting as always, Ricardo. So thank you so much. And if you're interested in checking out more events with us this semester, you can go to gsws.sas.upenn.edu. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for
everyone listening and watching.